project-based learning and design thinking in the classroom and from a distance. A little bit of housekeeping to start us off with. First off, you'll notice that you are all muted and you won't be able to unmute yourself. If you have any questions, we will have a question time at the end, but if you put your questions into the chat box as we go along, my wonderful colleague Helena will be moderating this session. So when you have a question, doesn't matter when you post the question, Helena will be keeping track of all these questions, and at the end she'll be able to ask me the questions and I can answer hopefully as many as possible that we can do. I also have a couple of my wonderful colleagues in here with me, Alicia and Hayley, both of which will be able to answer any smaller questions you might have in the chat, anything technical if you're not 100% used to Zoom, which I think a lot of us have had a crash course in the last couple of months. But if there's a couple of things that you're unsure of or things like that, Hayley and Alicia will be more than happy to help you out. The last thing is, I have been expecting a package all day, and it would only be Murphy's Law that that package is to arrive while I'm in the middle of speaking to you all. So if you hear what sounds like a phone going off and a landline, that would just be my doorbell. I will ignore it. I'm sure there'll be someone else in my apartment building who can let them in. But don't be afraid if that's what you hear. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Give me a minute. I think I can go like that, and then great. Hopefully everyone can see that. I'm actually going to go like that. Great, so first things first, who am I? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessie Roberson. I am currently a Learning Innovation Specialist at Te Papa, but even more currently, I'm a Learning Innovation Specialist in my lounge. So I have been living in Wellington for, I think it's about 12 years now. I originally moved here to go to university, where I have a Bachelor of Arts in Theatre and Film, and then a postgraduate diploma in primary school teaching, and a couple of years down the track, the postgraduate certificate in digital and collaborative learning. I was in a year 7 and 8 class for roughly just over 5 years, about 5.5 years, before I came to work at Te Papa in our learning lab, Hinatori, which is some of the photos that you can see there. For those of you that don't know, Hinatori is our digital learning lab at the museum. It's a place where schools and other groups can come and visit us, and we look at our taonga within our museum, and then we can bring it back into Hinatori and explore it using some really amazing digital tools and different ways. So you might be thinking, okay, so where does project-based learning fit in? And I think for me, it all came in with EQC. EQC are one of our partners at Te Papa, and they came with the idea last year of making a resource around building resilience after natural disasters, such as earthquakes. And I thought to myself, wow, that's a really cool resource. That's really interesting, because how do you teach a child to be resilient? And how do you teach anybody to be resilient? Because resilience is something that's built and it's based from experience. It's not something that you can just say, this is how to be resilient. So I kind of started a journey on exploring how you would go about teaching these things. And I had done a little bit with project-based learning within my classroom when I was teaching, and to me that seemed like a really good place to start. And so as I look further into that, into project-based learning or inquiry learning, they're quite interchangeable. I started to come across a lot of design thinking as well. And the one thing that I really, really enjoyed about that was that the design thinking process was, to me, a lot like what you would do when you were building resilience. So it really moved from empathy to action. The same as you would when you build resilience. You start with that empathy and understanding what the problem is, and then you move to action it. So I'm really excited to share my findings and share what I kind of came up with in creating this resource, and hopefully it can help some of you guys in your classroom and from a distance. So first up, what is project-based learning? Like I said, can also be known as inquiry learning. It's where students gain knowledge and skills by working on a single problem for an extended period of time. So they have this one problem, an idea, and it's something that's worked on for a lot of time, and then there's a lot of different skills that are gained throughout it. It's also quite cross-curricular, so it quite naturally involves different subjects, and they kind of come in along the way. A lot of the times the problems that the children are solving are community-focused problems, and so there's something that the community has said, hey, here's something that we could change, or something that the school has said to them, this is a problem that we're facing and we'd really like to explore it further. And it really makes students feel like the work that they're doing is meaningful, and that it gives it a bit of context, and it's not just you come to an end and then it's finished. A lot of times they can see the work that they've done reflected back in within that community. And it integrates the key competencies, using language, symbols and text, thinking, participating and contributing. These all really happen almost as byproducts when you're doing project-based learning, because they just really happen naturally as you go through that structure of designing. So what is design thinking? Design thinking is putting a structure to project-based learning. So when I was looking at project-based learning and inquiry learning, I was finding a lot of different ways that people were doing it. And to me, I was kind of thinking, there's this one and there's this one and there's this one. And I really looked into one that I thought worked well, and like I said, followed that idea from empathy to action. And so the structure that I settled on is by Stanford Design School, and it's one that they follow. It's very iterative, it's non-linear, so it does follow a linear pattern, which you'll see, but the idea is that students can move between the different stages, and they should see that as part of the process rather than thinking it of as going back a step, or that I have to finish this step before I start this one, because that's not how it works. The structure itself links many subjects together, and it also means that projects can be tailored to suit each individual learner and their way of thinking. So the way one learner, so with keeping the project, the structure quite open, it means that the learner can follow it in a way that works best to their needs, to the way they think, and to the way they learn. So you're probably going, well, what's the structure? This is the structure. So like I said, this is the Stanford Design School process. This is also the same process that is recommended on TKI. And I do have all these links at the end of this PowerPoint that I'm using. I'll be sending that out to you guys. So don't worry about having to get everything down. You're more than welcome to take the stuff that I send to you. But this is the structure. So it starts with empathise, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And like I said, it is non-linear. It is iterative. The idea is that you will probably follow it to begin with and then bounce between them. That's why we're trying not to put it too much in a line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you all the structure, the different steps, and I'm going to be giving you some examples of how these can be used in the classroom and from a distance. And the example that I'm going to be using is from the resource that I designed. I'll also give you guys the link to that resource at the end. And I'm sure you guys will be able to come up with different ideas as well, but that's just the example that I'm going to be using. But obviously the first thing is, how does that work at a distance? So what it does is it brings structure to home learning. So it's steps for students and their families to follow along. They're given that structure, they're given the problem, and they can kind of follow along at their own pace, which can work really well for some students. It means they can use what they have at home. Obviously, what they have at home is going to differ to what they have in the classroom, but that's the same as any project. You have to use what you have around you in life as well as in school. We use what we have available to us, and that in itself is learning. So the students will be able to follow this process at home and think to themselves, okay, well, that's a really good idea, but actually all I have is this, this, and this. So how can I use that as part of it? It also gives depth to distance learning and a project to focus on. So some people are struggling to, how do I get that depth of learning? This can be a really good way because they are given a problem to solve, and being able to follow the structure means that they're able to use it to find their own path, use it at their own pace, at their own leisure, and gives them something at the end to kind of go, wow, you know, I created that and I was stuck at home the whole time, but I actually ended up solving a problem that's quite important and that's I can see reflected in my community. So just have a drink. Okay, so starting with Empathise. So the first thing that we need to do, like I said right at the beginning, is empathise. We need to understand where the problem is coming from. So what does it mean? Students are introduced to the problem and to the audience that they are designing for. They use different mediums to help empathise with the audience and to gain interest in the project. So this is all about pulling together as much information as possible to get the students to really understand who they are making the solution for, what the problem is, what the context of the problem is. So rather than just saying this is it, going, well, here's the backstory. Here's what these people have been through. So what does this look like in the classroom? That can be interviews with stakeholders. It could be reading articles and viewing media. It can be a discussion and brainstorming. So if we take the EQC, for example, we had in there a whole heap of different media and different videos that students could work through, whether that be in reading groups, whether that be by themselves, and they were able to start to understand and dig a little deeper. I'm based in Wellington, I taught based in Wellington, but if I was maybe near a place that had had a significant earthquake, it would be great to get somebody in, especially somebody in who had dealt with some issues after the earthquake, and having a real life person for them to talk to is really good. What might this look like for distance? Well, we could go with the flipped learning idea of them giving them videos or things to read and then coming together for a discussion if you're a school that's able to use Zoom to have discussions. Or they could come together to share, to add to a shared brainstorm, for example, Google Docs. If they're not able to access any technology, it could be a discussion with family members. It could be a phone discussion, again, with one of these stakeholders. It could, yeah, and students could also find information and share it back themselves. So you could say, we're doing something about earthquakes. I want everyone to go and find as much as they can interview people that they know about that have been in an earthquake and what happened after, because that's where we're going to be looking. After that, we want to be defining. So after we've got all this information, we need to start bringing it back down to write a challenge statement. So using the information they've found, they define what the problem is that needs to be solved, and we write a challenge statement. So how that might look in the classroom is students coming together and having a discussion about that problem. They might be taking the information that they've got from when they were empathizing, and if they put it into a Google Doc, they might be doing that. It could be different reading groups coming together, creating a huge shared brainstorm, and then bringing that all back down to what is the problem? What is the challenge? What is it that they need to be finding the solution for? And at distance learning, again, this could be achieved through Google Docs. This could be achieved through sharing in any which way. It could be that just the teacher collates all the feedback into one challenge statement and then passes that information to the students, however they're able to do so, and asks for feedback potentially, or maybe if you're working with younger ones, it's just, okay, here is your problem. And then they can start that. So drink. The next one would be ideate. So once we've got that problem and we know exactly what it is that we're trying to find a solution for, this is where we start coming up with those solutions. And this is where you get to have those really fun brainstorming ideas with your class, where we need to have one of those huge ones where we say that no question or no answer is wrong. You have, there's blue sky thinking. If you had all the money, all the time, and all the resources you could possibly imagine, what are all the things that you could come up with? You could use thinker's keys. We can use I've seen so many teachers have so many brilliant different ways of getting those ideas out of the students, whether it be, I want you to come up with 100 solutions in 5 minutes, and it just cracks on really, really fast. But we really want to encourage them to think outside the box, to think of different ideas. Distance learning, that could be giving them something like a cardboard tube or a scarf or a fork and saying, okay, as a whānau, you guys have 5 minutes to come up with as many possible things as you could do with a fork. And that gets them thinking outside of the square. And then we go, okay, so let's swap that fork out with our challenge statement. What are heaps of different things that we could possibly come up with? So as an example for that, in the EQC resource that I have, it's actually aimed, I have a kind of it's about year 2 to 5, and then a 6 to 9, 10. Could just be, so for the years 2 to 5, we kind of narrowed it down a little bit and just keeping to building problems that they come up with. So what happens to a building when it's been hit by an earthquake? And some of the ideas they come up with is, well, stuff comes out of the ground like liquefaction, pipes get bent up, buildings and walls fall over, all these different ideas. Okay, so what are some solutions we can come up with? Well, we can make houses out of cotton wool, then the walls aren't going to fall over. Okay, put it down. Whatever it is you want to come up with. With the older students, you might want to look into some more in-depth ideas. So not just building, but you might want to start looking at some problems that they face socially, emotionally. Again, it completely depends on the learner. So they're going to go in the direction that suits them the most based on what it is that they found through their empathizing and their ideating. They're going to start going, well, I'm actually really interested in the amount of younger students that ended up leaving because of this, because of heightened anxiety, and I want to come up with a way to maybe help that out. And that's completely up to them. They can come up with heaps of different things. Next, we prototype. So from there, they're going to go through and go, okay, what are some of the limitations that I have? And this is going to look the same pretty much in the classroom or at a distance. In the classroom, you might have them learning in groups or by themselves. I mean, you know your students, you know what's going to be best for them, and that could be the same as distance. If you are lucky enough to have a class that are communicating a lot digitally and the prototype they come up with is something that's digital, great, but they'll still get the exact same out of it if it's just a student and their whānau, you know, maybe mum or brothers and sisters or dad or someone, and they come up with the same thing. So what they're going to do is they're going to go through some of these ideas and pick out the ones that they think they're able to make. So they're going to go, okay, maybe a house with cotton wool walls, yeah, but I don't actually have any cotton wool at home, so maybe I won't do that one. Or someone else might look at it and go, okay, I can see right now one swift breeze, especially in my Wellington weather, and you've lost your house. So maybe I'm not going to go with that. But again, these might be things that some learners will learn later on in the course, and then they'll come back to the prototyping and maybe choose a different idea. So the two ideas I'm going to take are, for the juniors, they will decide that maybe one of them has a plumber as a family, and they go, oh, every time there's an earthquake, our pipes get warped and we have to replace so much piping within our house. And one kid's going, well, we have metal and silicone straws, why can't we have silicone pipes? Okay, that's your idea. And then my senior idea that I'll go for is students who have decided that they want to create a digital resource for children who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, and maybe a place where they can go to find places to go for help, to people to talk to, and what to do if they're feeling anxious. And that's the ones that they've settled on because they're the ones that they have found they have the right resource to be able to do, because the digital resource they could do from home at a distance, and the kids with their silicone pipes, maybe they've got a whole heap of silicone straws at home that they're just edging to glue together. So from there, we get into testing. So prototyping and testing, again, so interchangeable, really kind of working together, going back and forth, back and forth. So if we take the pipes, for example, they're going to get in there, they're going to start sellotaping a whole heap of silicone straws together, and then they're going to pour some water through it by testing it and go, oh, silicone and sellotape don't actually work. Back to the drawing board, part of that iterative process and understanding. So in the testing, we really want them to be seeking feedback. We want them to be going back to some of those original people that they talk to, and even maybe completely new stakeholders, and getting some of that feedback on, this was my problem, this is the solution I've come up with, what should I do, how is it looking? We want them to understand that it is iterative, that it does go back and forth, that you can't just go from making a prototype and then it's done. We don't know if it's actually going to suit those people. So they need to be trying out the prototypes, creating, there can be discussions in the older students around creating a fair test. And what does it look like when you want to test something like this? How do you know if you're successful? What is it you need to be doing? Maybe with some of the juniors, for example, you have a certain test that you're like, everybody's going to be doing pipes, you know, everyone's decided that they're doing the pipes, or you've given them 3 tasks, there's pipes, there's liquefaction, and there's walls, and these are the 3 tests of how you're going to test it, and your prototype needs to pass that test. So we need to get, your silicone piping needs to go around a corner, and I need to be able to pour 500 mils of water through that piping, and it shouldn't leak anywhere. It should just come out at the end. That's your test. So yeah, I've said the designing tests for their prototypes, which hinge on going back to the original problem. So that's a great way to work on that iteration. They might realize halfway through their test that what they've done isn't going to work and is never going to work. And we really need to make sure that they understand that that is all part of the process, and that is really good learning, and that happens all the time in real life. Because sometimes you get so far and you go, well, I kind of have to leave it here. I'm out of resources. One of the things I really like to use is the Avatar movie, for example, and how it took, I could be wrong, Avatar fans, I think it was about 8 years to make the first one. And I think a lot of that came down to the fact that they got to a point where they were like, technology hasn't evolved for us to be able to do what we want to do. So rather than making a subpar version, which wasn't going to fit the brief that they needed the movie to do this, and they didn't have the technology to do that yet. So they waited for the technology to come up. They waited until they had those resources. And we need to be telling students that don't finish at subpar. If you don't have what you need and you think that you can't create something that's going to fit that original problem with what you have, try something else. Try a different one. Leave it there. Maybe come back when the situation changes, when you've got more paper in the classroom, or, you know, somebody's, you know, the teacher's found a hot glue gun in the school and glue gun sticks, which is a miracle. And so now they're able to use the hot glue gun to stick those silicone pipes to each other. It's all part of that feedback. And again, same as distance learning. So once they've made that prototype, they can be seeking ideas from the teacher, they can be seeking ideas from other family members, anybody that they can kind of get in touch with to go, here's my problem, here's what I've come up with, give me some feedback, tell me how it works. And then the last step that I like to have, I always put share in there as an added extra. That's not part of it, but for me, and I think from an educational point of view as well, I think it's really important for them to get to a point where they can share what it is that they have done. And that is definitely not a finished prototype, but I think it depends on you as a teacher at what point that sharing is. If that sharing is something that happens, you know, maybe every second week on a Friday, we share where we're at with our project. And then come the end of the term, that's the end of the project. That final share is where we tell it. Maybe that final share is a big gathering. You know, maybe that's when we're getting in those stakeholders back into the classroom. It's a big thing for the students to work towards, where they can create presentations. Maybe they've got a video. It would be really good to encourage them to keep some kind of a journal, whether it be a video journal, a written journal, drawings, whatever works best for the student, of that process that they're going through, because we want them to understand that the sharing at the end doesn't mean that they have to have a finished prototype. What they're sharing is the journey that they've been on. Because if they have a finished prototype and they've managed to find a solution to that problem, fantastic. But maybe it is that what they had, they aren't able to provide a solution to that problem, and that's okay, because it's about that journey. And sharing back is really important for them to be able to see other people kind of get that recognition for the work that they've done, so that even if they feel like they don't have a tangible product at the end that they can show, they're able to show the journey that they've been on and be just as proud of that as if they had a tangible product. And again, that could be the same maybe if you're not able to physically get together, there are other ways to be showing and telling that through the class, or even if it's just creating some kind of project that gets videoed and sent through, or even just showed when we do all get back into class, we can go, hey, what was that share? How did you guys go with that project? Show me what you've got to share, and let's have a sharing day of how our project went when you guys were all at home, and see who came up with what, because it could be really interesting to see almost the tangents that the different students go off and take, and how they really take that problem and put their own spin on it, which is very cool. So some of the resources that I've got, and again, like I said, I am going to be able to, I'll send you guys all of this so you can see, but we do have some really good resources here around project-based learning and design thinking. There's probably more than this, but there are some really good ones on TKI, and especially around, there's a really great video on, I think it's this one here, about a very young class who got to have a go. So I know we do have some ECE teachers in here with us. Thank you for coming. So that one in there has a really cool one, how some students, a video around how some younger students use the design thinking process to create new animals, if you've seen that. So they were able to look at animals that already existed, and the different parts of the animals, and then they used clay to, they kind of reimagined what these animals were like, and took what they thought were the best parts of each animal, created a brand new animal using clay, painted it up. But their stakeholder was their school janitor, I think it was, who used to work at their local zoo. So he became their person that they could talk to. He came in the end, and he talked about animals and the different types that they had. And then when they were up to their testing phase, they were able to present to them the clay animals that they had made. And he kind of said, well, does he need gills and wings? And so it was really interesting to be able to have what this student saw as an expert come back and make that commentary on their animals. And then they're able to say, well, I put gills and wings on an animal because of this, or actually maybe I didn't need both. And also throughout the process, they kind of realized, if I put an elephant's head on a chicken's body, my clay statue is actually going to fall over because it's weighted too much. So I can see how in real life, actually, maybe that won't work. So it's all really good learning, and it can happen regardless of the level you're at, regardless of the content. Like I said, it's really cool to find those community-based ideas, so you can get out into the community and say, hey, you know, or talk to husbands, partners, wives, friends. Sometimes you can find some really interesting problems from people from different trades and different ideas. They can go, well, we always have this problem at work where, you know, we've got a whole heap of this type of thing and nowhere to store it, or no way to store it. And that in there is a great problem for kids to be able to solve themselves, and they can get really into it. And they might even solve that problem for that business, which is just really, really cool for them to see that learning happening in real life. I've also put a link down here to the resource that I created. It's as a PDF, so feel free to download it, use it how you need to use it. Like I said, the topic that I use is creating resilient communities after natural disasters, but you can take that out and you can slot in whatever content you need. I've made sure to be quite precise with the design thinking, with the structure, so that someone could take it and kind of go, oh yeah, so Jess did it like this with earthquakes, but I can just do it like this and like this, which ends up working really, really well. But I will definitely make sure to send this all out to you within the next couple of days, as well as we are recording this, so I'll put this up on our YouTube for any of your colleagues who might not be able to make it, or someone who you're thinking to yourself right now, oh, they should have been here. It's all good. We got you covered. So we have some time for questions. I will turn my screen off. I will stop sharing my screen now, and we'll get some questions. Actually, before I do stop sharing it, just some links. The images that I have in here, I'm so lucky, Studio C Design, they did them for us. We've got our Te Papa stuff for our educators, EQC, and also Raranga Matahiko, which is our Decile 1 to 3 learning program as well. We have at Te Papa. So those are in there too for you guys to look at. Okay, Helena, how are we going? I will stop sharing.
Hi, Jessie.
Hey.
So I have a handful of questions already for you, and maybe just while I'm going through these with you, if anybody else has anything, just chuck that in the chat.
Awesome.
Okay, so I think you kind of touched on one of them just when you were talking about the example from the TKI website, but could you see this being able to be integrated in a learning through play environment?
I definitely think, to me, I think there's a really valuable link there. I think it would totally depend on how you're running your learning through play environment, but the idea of having a problem and then an open-ended way of finding solutions, I think that could be a really cool way. And even just starting out as easy as if it was your really, really younger students, having a problem that's given by the teacher and then a table full of interesting resources and going, what can you use from this table to solve this problem? All the way up to, yeah, giving a big problem and letting students work on it throughout their own time. And, you know, it's those same properties as learning through play. If someone's working on a project, we just leave it there. That's the project that they're learning on. And it's something that they can come back to as resources change, as ideas change, as conversations happen.
Oh, so maybe just going right back to the beginning of this process, when you're thinking about the problem, so would students be given the problem, or would they be given the opportunity to choose their own problem to work on?
Ooh. I think that completely depends on your students. I think you as a teacher understand where your students are at in terms of that kind of thinking and that kind of capability. If you know that giving them sky's the limit is just going to end up with you having a massive headache because you're project managing 30 different projects that are going from how can I efficiently fuel a coal train to what kind of food can I make with dry ice, it's going to be a nightmare. But if you can narrow it down, it's completely up to you. You know how your class works, and you'll understand whether keeping it broad would work, letting them go nuts would work, or maybe narrowing it down and helping them to understand, you know, like I said, in my EQC one, I have ended up saying, this is the problem. These are the 3 solutions that we've come up with together. So in that Ideate, as a class, coming back together and going, okay, what are the 3 most popular? This one, this one, this one. Okay, these are the 3 solutions that we're going to work on. This is how we're going to test them. And now you go off and you find your best designs for piping, your best designs for walls, and your best designs for stopping liquefaction. And then this is how we're going to test them. I think it's completely up to where your class are at, how they work, and yeah, how you want to run that class with them.
Great. Does anyone else have anything? Jessie, I've got another one, but I'm gonna actually send it to you via an email. Just somebody asking for some resource suggestions, which I think might be easier for you to just follow up in an email, and potentially just send that out to everybody as well, so that if they're all interested. Has anyone else got anything that they would like to ask Jessie before we close off?
I will give you guys my, well, you'll have my email address when I send out the link. So please feel free to send me any emails or anything that you guys are kind of sitting there stewing on, because I can think maybe you might want to go back and have a chat with your team or something like that. I'm more than happy to answer those questions. You know, I'm at home. So, you know, if you have a question that you're like, Jess could probably just answer this in 5 minutes, I'd love to answer it. One of my big things when I came out of the classroom was that I really wanted to make sure that the information that I was able to learn like this, that I was able to give back to teachers. So I'm really, really open to hearing from you guys. Just be like, hey, saw you in the webinar, wanted to clear this thing up, or I'm halfway through and I'm a little bit stuck where I go with this. Please find me off an email. I'd love to hear from you. Definitely.
Jessie, I have 2 more for you.
Great.
Let's go with this one first. We'll go with your knowledge. Do you know if there is an accountability method of a way students can monitor their own progress towards a goal in this kind of project?
I've seen a few different methods. I've seen some people have accountability contracts. That could be because I worked in intermediate with intermediate students. So I think the idea of an accountability contract can work for them. I do think it could come down to, again, to your students and the way they monitor their work. The accountability could also come in at the sharing process, because if you've done this huge big, you know, you've got the sharing process gathered and you've got parents, you've got all these different stakeholders here, and the group gets up to speak in front of them and they don't have much to contribute, that does kind of speak for themselves. And I do think that students will understand, oh, there's nowhere to hide. I can't hide anywhere. I need to actually be accountable for what I'm doing. And that for some children does work. Maybe it doesn't work the first time, but it's a learning process. Maybe it will work the second time. Alicia, do you have anything that you can think of? Helena, are you able to unmute Alicia if she has any ideas of accountability? Just because we worked in different schools.
Oh, there we go.
I'll turn my video on again so you can see my face. For me, what I did, because I worked with a slightly younger age group than Jess, like literally just kind of, 5, 6, 7. What I did was I sat down with them. I would have fortnightly check-in sessions to make sure that they were on track. And at the start of the project, I sat down and we went through the different stages and actually planned out tasks. So in the Ideate, it was like, go and read XYZ journal stories to help you, and then get them to sign it off. So it actually was broken down a lot clearer. We both knew what they were doing, and went through it that way. For my students that really struggled in terms of managing self, because as Jessie was saying, it works on key competencies and managing self can be a difficult one. I actually had kind of group projects that those 3 children were working on together. So they were working on their own, but they were working in kind of what you would say like a workshop group. And I would check in with those targeted students almost every day, every second day, and help them kind of work through it so that it was a lot more focused for them. So I hope that helps some of you guys.
Thanks, Alicia.
Okay, Jessie, have you worked on projects that are more conceptual?
Conceptual. Can I get an example of conceptual? The person who wrote that, are you able to kind of write in the chat? Do you mean something that can't kind of come to a physical formation, something that's more kind of idealistic? I haven't, but I guess, yeah, that would be interesting to do. I personally haven't, although I guess it's just a different medium. I mean, so long as the student was able to still follow that project and follow those outcomes, you know, if they're deciding to go with something that's conceptual and they're still able to follow the structure, they're still able to meet every single one of those milestones, then it should be fine if they don't have something physical at the end. I mean, it would be the same as if they created a digital resource, I guess, rather than saying, we've made a pamphlet and we're going to print 50,000 of them. We don't have the budget all the time to be printing 50,000 of their pamphlets, but they'll have the digital one up and ready to go. So, yeah, I guess it completely would depend. If they can still reach those milestones, go for it. And you never know, that's something that could be conceptual. Maybe one of those things is, in the future, if this could happen, what kind of resources might we be looking at to bring it to realization?
Cool, thank you, Jessie. We've had one more question just about how the best way to assist students who are struggling with the learning process. In the interest of time, I'm happy for you to answer that now, or if you would rather follow it up in your follow-up email, we can go with that as well. What do you think?
I mean, the way that I have kind of done that in the past is like Alicia said, those ones are the ones that are kind of grouped together, or if they don't work together, if you're lucky enough to have a TA or another teacher in there or someone to work with. I was really lucky enough that I had a TA and we sat down and grouped them all together. They all worked really well together. So again, that was another lucky thing. And we really narrowed it down as this is what they were doing. We talked with them, we got their ideas, we said, hey, what would you guys want to do with this? And then we came to the consensus and we wrote a plan, just like Alicia said, of this is what you need to do, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. And I think it's really cool because it's interesting to see the way that they tackle a problem at their level, because they'll still have a solution for it. They'll absolutely have a solution for it. And sometimes it could be the most out of the box solution that you've ever seen in your life. And you go, huh? But they've completely got it sorted. You can say, okay, well, what are the steps you're going to do? All right, well, we're going to start with this. Then we're going to do this and do this and do this. And you're like, okay, go for it. You know? And so I think it is just kind of bringing them down a little bit, setting out a specific pathway for them to go, but letting them feel like they have had ownership within that pathway and within what it is that they're producing. That would be my best one.
Good stuff, Jessie. That's all the questions at the moment. So
Awesome.
I'll send it back to you to close. And obviously when for everybody else, just have a think. If there's anything else that you wanted to hear from Jess, she will absolutely very happily be in touch with you afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming along. I was really overwhelmed with the amount of people who wanted to come in and hear it. So it was really nice to hear that you guys were all into it and interested. And yeah, like I said, please do not be shy to flick me an email. I'd love to hear from you all. I will put the video of this up on YouTube, and I hope to see some of your students solving the world's problems. Thank you guys so much. It was awesome to have you. See you later.